Hello, my name is Paul Michaud. I'm the CEO of Proceve, and today we're going to talk about organization in a project and program management context. Being able to organize your programs, projects, and artifacts, particularly at scale, is critical to effective project management and ensuring success. In my experience, it's one of the biggest frustrations and sources of problems when I'm dealing with large projects in the enterprise. And typically what I found, and one of the key reasons why we decided to build the software at Perceive, is because the existing software, frankly, just didn't let us do this at scale well at all. So, what do we need to do this? It starts by being able to organize things, and we genuinely believe that looking at things hierarchically is the way to go. If we look at when we plan a project or a program, we almost always start out with a vague idea and then we start to flesh out the details. So, if I'm building a piece of software like a project management software, I'm going to say, okay, I need to manage requirements, I need to manage tasks, then I don't have any details in those first statements, right? Those details are going to come later. And no matter how big or small the project is, we invariably start out that way. We never go, oh, I know all this little detail. It's always, okay, here's the high level vision of what we're going to do, and that we're going to iterate this, and over time, we're going to flesh it out, and we're going to develop more detail as we go. So, with that in mind, we kind of said, okay, what do we have to do, right? So, we designed this with us saying, let's look at the objectives and requirements. Okay, our project management software should be better than existing projects. Well, what does that mean? In our context, we wanted to say, okay, well, it needs to provide better organization capabilities than project software, right? It needs to support the fact that details are developed over time in an iterative manner. It needs to include all the required functionality without needing to integrate it with other software, right? These are some of the objectives we started out with when we started to build our software. As you can see here, that top level statement of just saying we need to be better than existing products, well, there's details associated with that we build up over time. So if we come back here and say it should support the fact that details are developed over time, right? Then, what are we going to do? It should support documents and requirements, task test issues, and other artifacts in a single application, right? This is a sub item, and we're developing that over time as we flesh this out, right? If we go back to the fact that we're supporting more details over time in an iterative manner, it should allow for infinitely deep levels of sub-items to be defined over time. The user interface should provide a way to organize artifacts into infinite subtrees. As you can see, we started out high of saying it needs to be better. Well, it should support the fact that details are developed over time. Well, that implies that we need to have this idea of sub-items that are defined over time, and that implies that there needs to be a user interface that allows us to organize the artifacts into these infinite sub-items, and so on. And on and on we go. So as you can see, even in this simple example, looking at how we sort of thought about things for Perceive, you can see that the level of detail builds up over time. And the problem is that most existing software today for project management doesn't really support this on all artifacts. Going back, Microsoft Project has supported the idea of a hierarchical view forever, but only on tasks. It doesn't have it for requirements. And it's actually the requirements that become really key in a lot of cases. Inside Perceive, we actually support this idea of a hierarchical view on everything. Even if I build a test, I might have a test to test a requirement, but that might have subtests and so on, right? I may have tasks with lots of subtasks, and other programs potentially allow you to have a level of subtasks or whatever, but we allow you to be an infinite number of subtasks. It doesn't matter, and each of those subtasks are full tasks in their own right. They're not a special type that's hamstrung like a lot of others are. But this idea of hierarchy matters. In addition, I might want to shove it over and say, okay, I'm going to nest this stuff down, and I should be able to move everything, and it should reflect and keep that organization. And I should be able to move things around and decide, hey, this is really kind of a sub item of this other item. and I shouldn't lose any of that relationship. And our software allows you to do that. In addition to that fundamental hierarchical view of things and sort of saying, hey, I can group things, I can say, here's all the subtasks necessary to build a particular screen in our software, or, here's all the requirements for it, and they're all grouped together and organized well. You also have the ability to organize in other ways, including categories, groups, and tags. So every artifact can be associated with these categories, groups, and or tags. And so for categories, right, you could have things like software, for example, or a user interface or a web interface. And the categories are hierarchical. So software is a top level category. User interface could be a subcategory of software. Web interface could be a subcategory of user interface. And we can get down to mobile interfaces, etc. But then under mobile, I might decide, oh, I have iOS interfaces versus Android interfaces, and so on. But you get the idea. The categories themselves are not just a label, they themselves are organized and structured so that you can define things over time so that you associate things in the way that you want. When we move over to sort of what we call groups or group tags, these are not hierarchical at the moment, and they could be things like business analysis, development, for example, testing. It could be whatever you want. The thing is, group tags, like categories, are predefined in the configuration and can be set so that they're used consistently throughout your project and or program. You can even set them account wide, but on every single project, you can choose a particular set of groups, a particular set of categories that are available within that project. So for example, if I'm doing a software development project inside my company, then the categories and groups I might want to use is going to be very different than if that same company is doing a marketing project, right? For marketing, they're going to have different categories of tasks or items that they need to do, and they may want to group things differently and so on. So you can set this and configure it and reuse them on a project by project basis or globally. It's up to you. Tags in general are much more fluid. They're, like our typical hashtag. So I could put pound BA instead of business analysis, or I could do pound dev or pound test, etc. Tags can be actually defined on the fly, unlike groups or categories, which are pre-configured. So if you find that the categories and groups don't give you what you need, you can actually add additional tags and have additional flexibility associated with that. So, as I said, categories and groups are predefined. Tags can be defined on the spot and are freeform.